Today we're doing 2 college football player props here on PrizePicks for Saturday, December 2nd. Before we get started, you guys take a look in the description below of this video. You can hop into our premium Discord. It's $9.30 per month. That's where I post all the plays I'm making on PrizePicks. We also have other premium cappers in there as well. They post all of their plays, research, and analysis. Overall in there, it's a super positive community. Everyone is trying to help each other cash. So again, link in the description below for that. I also need to mention I'm not a gambling expert. This is not financial advice. These are simply plays I'm personally looking at making. Hopefully giving you guys some insight and analysis to make your own player prop decisions here. Again, no one's pressing submit on those parlays other than yourselves. But let's get right into it, you guys. This is the conference championship games. I am recording this video on Friday. We do have some games here on Friday specifically. But these are for the Saturday, December 2nd conference championship games. We got some elite matchups here, in my opinion. The conference championship games are usually fun ones. Obviously a ton on the line for all these teams, hopefully getting into the college football playoff and, like a Power 6 bowl game or a New Year's 6 bowl game, sorry. But yeah, 2 player props that I do like from this slate. Let's not waste any time. Let's get after it. So the first one's going to be Jalen Milroe, quarterback, Alabama. I like his over 21.5 fantasy score. If we look at Jalen Milroe in comparison to like the fantasy score props on the board, I mean, Penix is at 22.5, Bo Nix at 28.5. Kaden Salter's at 21.5, Alan Bowman's at 16.5, Quinn Ewers at 19.5. So for a player like Jalen Milroe to be at 21, to me kind of seems like a little bit of a bargain, considering kind of how I'm expecting this game to go. And again, with college football, you never really never really know how these games will go specifically. But 5.5 point spread, 54.5 over under. And right off the bat, Jason McClellan, sorry. He's currently questionable, officially questionable, and he didn't do much in practices. So if he's out for this one, I definitely think it, causes Alabama to rely a little bit more on Jalen Milroe using his legs. All right, we look over an Outlier. Again, there's a link in the description. You get a 7-day free trial with Outlier. The odds for his fantasy score essentially are pretty decent. We get minus 130 on DraftKings to score a rushing touchdown. And then we also get over minus 137 to go over 39.5 rushing yards, minus 125 over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Right? I mean, Vegas giving Alabama, 5.5 points per 54.5 over under. Vegas giving Alabama some decent points here, right? They're expecting Alabama to score the ball. They're expecting this game to be a shootout, or somewhat of a shootout at least. College football 54.5 is not crazy, but it's a decent amount of scoring college football game, but nonetheless a decent amount of scoring in this one. So we look at Jalen Milroe. Obviously had a rough start to the season. There were some questions about the quarterback position. He didn't play in this game against USF. But since that game, he's played extremely well, like really, really well in my opinion here. He had a 15.1 fantasy point score game here against Tennessee. But then this game against Chattanooga, obviously it was a blowout. Did not really need to even throw the ball. I think the backups all played in this one. Only took 16 passing attempts. Still finished with 19.7. So if you take away this game, he's gone over 21.5 in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his last 7 games, essentially. Just with what he can do on the ground with his feet, he's really, really stepped up, in my opinion. A super exciting player to watch, being able to pass the ball. And you guys saw the game last week against Auburn. 259 in the air, 2 touchdowns, 107 yards on the ground, and has really been able to establish himself as an elite dual threat quarterback. 4 rushing touchdowns in this game here against LSU, 3 rushing touchdowns against Kentucky, 2 rushing touchdowns against Mississippi State, and then 2 rushing touchdowns even his first start of the year back against Middle Tennessee, when he had 36.6 fantasy. But doing a little bit of a deeper dive specifically on this matchup versus Texas. Okay, this matchup versus not Texas, Georgia. I do apologize. Looking at this matchup versus Georgia, right? We look at Georgia. Obviously, they're undefeated. Obviously, they're a very good defense. But they haven't really played the type of quarterback that Jalen Milroe is specifically. Now, we look at some other quarterbacks and just quarterbacks that have faced Georgia this season. We look at Haynes King just last week against Georgia. Obviously, Georgia Tech's offense is nowhere near Alabama's offense. He finished with 20.7 fantasy. 158 in the air, no passing touchdowns. He ran for 24 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, right? So 20.7 for a player like Haynes King in an offense that's nowhere near as elite as Alabama gives me promise here for Jalen Milroe. We look at Brady Cook against Georgia, 14.4 fantasy, ran for 39 yards on the ground, right, through 2 picks, but 39 yards on the ground, right? We're starting to see some consistency with kind of how this works. We look at Georgia against Graham Mertz. They gave up a ton of passes in the air, 230 for 2 touchdowns, 19 fantasy, right? He's not a rushing quarterback, but he did score a rushing touchdown. Okay, we look at Auburn, Peyton Thorne. Now, this is the one that stood out to me. Okay, Peyton Thorne is a rushing quarterback, and I would say more of a rushing quarterback. I mean, he's more of a rushing. Probably Haynes King is a rushing quarterback for sure, but like Peyton Thorne is definitely a rushing quarterback. And we look at Peyton Thorne; he had 12 carries for 92 yards, and then the backup quarterback as well, Robbie Ashford, who I wouldn't consider a rushing quarterback, had 4 carries for 33 yards and a touchdown. So we're starting to see a similar trend here with them not being able to really stop the running quarterbacks, and running quarterbacks, causing specific issues. And then we also look here at Spencer Rattler. Against Georgia, he played pretty decent, 50.7 fantasy score, 256 in the air, but he also ran for eight rushing attempts for 35 yards, which again was one of his better rushing performances on the season. So we're seeing consistently here, 24 rushing yards. Georgia, Brady Cook, 39 rushing yards. Graham Mertz, negative rushing yards, obviously, but a rushing touchdown. Both quarterbacks for Auburn, 33 plus, and then Spencer Rattler, 35. So we're seeing this trend of rushing quarterbacks being able to run the ball against Georgia. Now, if Jalen Milroe can get us 50 plus rushing yards in this one, I really, really like the odds for this. I think obviously taking 21.5 fantasy score is a better pivot than just like specifically taking his rushing yards because he is a definite threat running the ball in the red zone, which benefits greatly to fantasy scores. So Jalen Milroe over 21.5 fantasy scores, the first play. Second play here is going to be receiving yards prop, and it's one we've actually taken, I think, a few weeks now. It's going to be Rashad Owens over 47.5. This is at the absolute lowest we're going to get this line, or the lowest this line has been, I think, in like the last 4 or 5 weeks. Taking a look at this matchup specifically, Texas is 15-point favorites here, 55 over/under. So we're expecting Oklahoma State to be in an absolute passing game script. Okay, we look at Rashad Owens. He's definitely had some up and down weeks, but consistently clearing this line. I mean, he's had 40 plus receiving yards in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight games. He's had at least 40 plus receiving yards and has been seeing at least 6 targets in all 8 of those games, 7 targets, 7 plus targets in 6 of the last 8 games specifically. Rashad Owens as well, over on Outlier. You can see the hit rate. 7 of his last 10 games, he's hit the over. Minus 115 on DraftKings, which is pretty standard. But he's over 43.5 here on books, on DraftKings and Caesars, which tells me PrizePicks knows something kind of that we don't, which gives me some just vibes that the over might be the play here. So we're looking at this game. Texas, they give up the 3rd most receiving yards to wide receivers. The 3rd most, okay, which coincides with their run defense being super elite. They give up the fewest rushing yards per game in the Big 12. Right here, only 85 rushing yards per game in the Big 12, but they do give up, like I said, the 3rd most receiving yards. And with Oklahoma State being 15.5-point underdogs in this one, I'm definitely thinking Alan Bowman's going to have to throw the ball. We look at Alan Bowman, the quarterback for Oklahoma State, and his passing yards line is set at 250.5. Right, so we're looking at Alan Bowman 250.5. We're looking at Rashad Owens at 47.5. It really coincides together, I think, nicely with at least we're seeing Alan Bowman's passing yards so high. That means his wide receivers are gonna at least benefit. Like some wide receivers are gonna eat. And then we just look at wide receivers game log this season versus Texas, and you can see that the Texas pass defense has been somewhat exploitable. 47.5, 48 is all we need, right? We look at Alabama quarterbacks. Or Alabama wide receivers, we saw 2 wide receivers clear this line and 1 wide receiver come close. We look at Oklahoma wide receivers. Obviously, Jaleel Farouk had 130 through the air. They ran the ball crazy against Texas, but Jake Stoops 55 and then Andre Anthony 42. So we're looking at 3 players on that game with over 40 receiving yards. We look at Houston, had actually 4 wide receivers hit the over on this, 68, 80, 80, and 83 wide receivers for Houston had 80 plus receiving yards. We look at Kansas State. We look at another 4 wide receivers, 69 plus receiving yards. We look at who's this? TCU, right? Savon Williams 164, Jared Wiley 65. So another 2 wide receivers smashing this 47.5 receiving yards line. And then Iowa State, Rocco Beck threw for 323 in the air. Jaden Higgins, Easton Dean, Benjamin Brahmer, and Jalen Noel all 45 plus receiving yards. So we're seeing numerous guys. We're talking about close to 15 different wide receivers have gone over 47.5 receiving yards against Texas. Pass heavy game script for Oklahoma State. I'm not expecting them to be able to run the ball a ton with Ollie Gordon, so I think they're going to be looking at Rashad Owens in this one. So here are the two plays for this YouTube video. Jalen Milroe over 21.5 fantasy, Rashad Owens over 47.5 receiving yards. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about these two plays. Drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and as always, let's cash.